This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito, Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and partner in crime. That is the Doc from Doc and Jock. His name is John Charles Macaroon. What's your middle name, John?
You said it, brother.
I did. Okay.
Great
How's
to
it going,
see you,
John?
sir. It's going pretty good, man. Always great to see you. Happy Tuesday. You're back on vacation. We'll tease it. On Saturday's podcast, the Two Bad Hombres podcast, we're going to recap your trip to Miami, and we're going to have a debate because all that hard-earned money that you're getting from DSP, you flushed it down the toilet, brother, and we're going to talk about it on the Two Bad Hombres podcast this Saturday, so tune in. But this is the Tigers Talk podcast. A lot of news in the week that you were gone on vacation. I'm ready, willing, and able to deliver a great podcast for you, and I want to be your great co-host, as always, executive producer, fine podfather like yourself, and I'm looking forward to hearing your take on the news that was for the Detroit Tigers this week.
Well, I'm glad that you're able and willing to produce a fine edition of the podcast because I didn't know that you were, able and willing initially. Now, also, we have to talk about and dive deeply into a few topics right away, Doc. And first and foremost for me, Team USA and Jim Leyland winning the World Baseball Classic title, the first ever in Team USA history, and Leyland cementing his legacy as a Hall of Fame skipper. If he wasn't already a Hall of Famer, he is now definitely, in my opinion. Also, Mark Lowe, gotta cover that topic. Him finally getting cut. It was a long time coming. It really was, Doc. Don't you think? I mean, making the money he wasn't worth it, and now they got to eat that salary, and they just had to cut ties, though, because he wasn't producing in spring ball either, Doc.
You can't feel bad for a guy who's going to get a check for $5.5 million to walk away. Can you believe that? And I think all around the consensus is that it's a good move. He just wasn't a guy that was going to be able to be productive for this team. And so now you know that we got to hone in on Pelfrey, Sanchez, the rest of that bullpen. A lot of scary things that we still got to worry about with this Detroit Tigers team ahead of the opening day game on Monday versus Chicago, the White Sox on the road. But in terms of Jim Leyland, I did watch that final game. There was a little bit of a hullabaloo regarding Puerto Rico. I guess people were a little bit offended. At the time, maybe wrong, some U.S. players were offended that they found out that the Puerto Ricans had scheduled a parade. That at the time, they thought that, oh, that's a little bit disrespectful, that they thought that, the American players thought that the Puerto Ricans were celebrating in advance, but it wasn't actually that case, but it was used as motivation for the Americans, and they came out and they dominated.
They kicked ass, didn't they?
It was a good game. It was fun. It was light. You looked at it, though, it was just a long game. Again, you look at it and you go, starts at, I think, 9 o'clock because it was played out in California. Just was a little bit too long of a game. I don't think the game wrapped up until like a little bit after midnight. But, I was a sports junkie at the time and I was watching it and it came across the television. I watched it. And again, you do sense that Jim Leyland's a genuine man. He was very emotional and he was kind of short in some of the interviews, just talking about, playing for your country, coaching for your country, and that, the American players can say that they, had an opportunity to play for the United States. It was nice. It was a nice competition, and the United States took it down. But I did not know that in the history of the World Baseball Classic, the United States had never won it. So kudos to them. They're off the schneid. They got their first World Baseball Classic, and Jim Leyland's legacy, it really didn't change too much because of this. He was a great manager. When you have a ring and you've taken a couple different teams to the World Series, you know that he's a good manager. It's just, in terms of where you would slot him, he's not a top 5 all-time manager.
Hall of Fame manager.
He isn't a Hall of Fame manager. I think that when you get to the World Series with 2 teams, one in the American League, one in the National League, you have an opportunity to state your case that Jim Leyland is a high-quality manager and one that if you were looking at the time, 10, 15 years ago, to start a franchise and to, really take it places, Jim Leyland was your guy. He's the epitome of a player's manager and one that it garners a lot of respect. When you talk to a lot of baseball players, that's how you know. When you talk to even the likes of Barry Bonds, who Jim Leyland had that epic blowout with, if you look on YouTube, Jim Leyland did not take no shit from anybody, and especially not Barry Bonds. And so when Barry Bonds was feuding, when he was with the Pirates, with a manager, he wasn't feuding with Jim Leyland. He was feuding with another position coach. Jim Leyland squashed it and went over there right away and said, hey, knock this shit off. If you're going to have this kind of attitude, you're going to have big problems with me. And, to this day, Barry Bonds gained respect for Jim Leyland for standing up to him because that's what he needed at that time. And this day and age, it might be a little bit different in terms of how he treats players, but in the end, Jim Leyland's a great manager. You can't argue it.
Player's manager, too, who was always the captain of his clubhouses, as he told Barry Bonds, and that epic tirade. In so many words, Bonds found out the hard way there that Leyland was the captain of the ball club. Even though Bonds was the superstar ball player, the best player on the team, one of the best players in the game all throughout his career, you know what? Leyland still was the respected skipper and leader of the ball club at all times, and he wanted it that way. He wanted to be the captain. And when you didn't refer to him or view him as a captain, he would let you hear about it, and rightfully so, as he let Barry Bonds know about it too. He didn't care how great of a ball player he was. He wasn't going to stroke his ego. He didn't step back or step away from any kind of confrontation which he viewed as necessary. If he viewed something as being necessary to get out, he was going to tell it to you no matter how big of a ball player you were, and that was the type of manager he was, and he was beloved by his players. He really was the definition of a player's manager all throughout his tenure as a skipper in the big leagues, including with the Pirates, who were really nothing there, remember, before he came on board as a manager, or had that dry spell at least before he became the skipper. And then he led them to the NLCS how many times there? Almost to the World Series, never to the Fall Classic, which was a big thing that I think Pirates fans now look back at and really regret about his tenure with the Pirates, that they missed out on the opportunity to reach a Fall Classic, which many thought, including Leyland, thought that the Pirates would have reached in those years where he was a skipper. And then, the Florida Marlins, a newfound ball club. What were the Marlins? I mean, nobody knew about the Marlins. He took that franchise to a World Series title. Think about it. And that franchise was barely even around at that point in 97. And then 3 pennants total in 2 different leagues. So 2 with the Tigers in the AL, 1 with the Marlins in 97 in the NL. To do it in 2 leagues too, Doc. No matter what you say about maybe the Tigers underachieving at times and not getting that World Series title, which is on him maybe, and maybe you criticize him for his mismanaging of the lineup, of the bullpen at times in his tenure with the Tigers, maybe even with Team USA, but now he's won with Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. Team USA had never done that before. The Tigers were miserable before he came on board. Then he led them to the World Series in his first year on the job in 06. What a miraculous year that was. And then to lead the Tigers to another American League pennant in 2012. So 3 pennants in totality, all the wins to his name as well throughout his big league managerial career. It tells me, Doc, that this victory in the World Baseball Classic only cements his legacy as a Hall of Fame skipper.
No doubt about it, Vito. I know you hold Jim Leyland in high regard, but I guess if you want to keep it fair and balanced, he did have issues at times with lineups, and he may have relied on role players a little bit too much. And I think the reason is when you look into it, he was a role player. So he had a great amount of respect for those guys that didn't have supreme talent. And that's why a guy like Don Kelly, that's why a guy like Andrew Romine still has a strong presence, because why are they on the Detroit Tigers team right now? Who is still a special advisor and a special consultant getting checks from the Detroit Tigers? One, Jim Leyland. And Jim Leyland is a guy that wasn't gifted with a whole bunch of natural talent per se, but he was able to kind of get whatever he could out of his career because of hard work and effort. And so guys like Don Kelly, guys like Andrew Romine are guys that are a staple of the Detroit Tigers because of the influence of Jim Leyland. And hey, guess what? Don Kelly is with the Tigers now in some capacity, I believe as a scout, and he's going to start working his way up. Why do you believe that he's there now? Because of the influence of Jim Leyland and the likes and upper management, who still have a ton of respect for those type of players. But in the end, Vito, I'm definitely interested in kind of recapping the week that was for the Detroit Tigers. I'm honestly, when the news came that they decided to part ways with Mark Lowe, I said, okay, good. You have a guy that just wasn't able to really deliver. And despite the fact that, he was owed $5.5 million, they pulled the trigger and they had to make that move. No doubt about it, because if you have a guy like Mark Lowe on your roster and you say, we're trying to field the best team out there, you can't have a guy like Mark Lowe. You can't have guys, Anibal Sanchez before he turned it around. Like that, pitching like that, it just sends a bad message. It's bad for morale. You can't win with Mark Lowe the way he was pitching on this Detroit Tigers roster. And it's unfortunate. I'm not certain that he's going to I know that he throws well, but in terms of consistency, in terms of getting guys out, a guy like Mark Lowe needed to be cut. It was the right decision.
It was a long time coming. As I said via Twitter, if you guys read me on Twitter, follow me at Vito Jerome, please do. It makes me feel really good, and really, it makes my heart feel well, okay? So, and I have a soft spot for people that follow me on Twitter. I'll say that much, too. But Mark Lowe was irrelevant last year in the bullpen, was really then a mop-up man is what he became after making $5.5 million last year, $5.5 million this year that the Tigers are still on the books for. And you know what? I don't really care about that salary. I don't think the Tigers do anymore. Obviously, that's why they cut him, because they realized, finally, it took long enough, but they realized that he's not worth that money, and it doesn't even matter if they had to buy him out, because he's irrelevant, no use for him in the bullpen, so get rid of him. Let somebody else take him on, okay? Because let's see if somebody even is willing to take him on, because he's looked so irrelevant last season and in spring ball this season, Doc, that I don't even know if a team's going to be willing to pick him up now at this point in the latter part of his Major League Baseball career. So he might be nearing the end of his Major League Baseball career. It might actually, he might want to play in the in independent ball. He might have to resort to that if he wants to keep playing baseball.
Ooh, Vito, you're going to relegate him to
I'm that sour on him. Well, yeah, independent ball. Put him right there. Let's see how it does in independent ball against subpar ball players. So, hey, I don't even know if he could perform that well against those guys. He's been that bad in a Tigers uni, and it was the time to cut him. It just, plain and simple, it was time to cut him, Doc.
Okay, Vito, you're absolutely right. And then the other big news of the week is, what the hell did Rich Doobie do to Anibal Sanchez? I guess that they got in the room and they said, you know what, let's tinker. And hey, tinkering is never a problem, right? Because I always tinker with your podcast. I'm like, hey, move the mic here, do it this way, do it that way, so that your fine podcast and you can really earn the status of Podfather, which is mostly due to me, which is great. But
you take in accountability for everything once again.
I'm the Rich Doobie so far this year of the podcast, and that I'm tinkering with your flawed mechanics.
Oh, thank you. Flawed mechanics.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Great to hear.
I tinkered with your mechanics, and now I've rounded this podcast. What are we on, 83? 84 episodes in. Now this podcast is taking shape. And since, I really think that since we started tinkering, your last 5 podcasts have been really outstanding.
Just so much better, just because of you and your influence. Yeah, I know. Let me give you a lot of credit and bow down to you once again, Doc. Episode 84, by the way.
84. And so what Rich Doobie did was he went into the lab and said, listen, have your arm slot a little bit more away from your body. And since then, Anibal Sanchez looks like a new guy, but he still isn't throwing super hard. And you could still argue that the talent that he was throwing against were really minor league players, but he's getting guys out. And since the mechanical change, he's worked his way onto the team. He's going to be on this team, definitely due to the money that he's making. But at least at this point in time, he's serviceable. But should he take the place of a Matt Boyd? Because still, it seems like that a lot of people are speculating that Boyd's going to end up in Toledo to start the year. And I still don't believe that that's the spot for him. Anibal Sanchez, in terms of what he's done and what I've seen, you can use him now as a long reliever or a guy that in situations can get guys out. But I don't think that at this point in time I have the confidence that Anibal Sanchez is going to be the right guy at number 5. So if it's between Sanchez and Boyd, don't you think the edge goes to Matt Boyd in terms of what he's been doing so far?
Obviously, it would be ludicrous right now for the Tigers to put Sanchez in the rotation come opening day as a number 5 starter over Matt Boyd, who's been better overall-wise this spring. And Boyd was better last year than Anibal Sanchez. So the Sanchez, the only reason, if you really want to ask the Tigers, the only reason why they would put him in the rotation as a number 5 starter over Matt Boyd right now is that big, ludicrous contract. The albatross of a contract that Sanchez is making right now will earn him that 5th starter job, if anything does at all. And I think if the Tigers put Matt Boyd in AAA, they'd be wasting a valuable arm in AAA Toledo, a guy that could contribute big-time production to the big league ball club and help the ball club be relevant to start off the season, which you can't guarantee with the injury now to J.D. Martinez. And, just some other areas, glaring voids in the roster, such as in center field. So the outfield is in flux now. You don't know what's going to happen in right field to replace J.D. in center field. And then, if you put Sanchez in as your 5th starter, I think you have a void at the back end of the rotation with him as your 5th starter too. And who even knows what you're going to get out of Jordan Zimmerman as the number 2, number 3, number 4, wherever you want to slot him in the Tigers rotation, Doc. So for me, Zimmerman, obviously still concerns about him, and I have concerns about the Tigers front office and that management. The guys making the decisions for the Tigers. If they slot Sanchez into the rotation as a number 5 guy over Matt Boyd, who is much more deserving of that gig at this point. So it would be an injustice, a big-time injustice to Matt Boyd and the Tigers franchise if they were to put Sanchez in as a number 5 starter, because it would hurt the Tigers to start the season. The Tigers would be just so much less well off if they play Sanchez in as a 5th starter, in my opinion.
Exactly, because I had this debate on Twitter, on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, and I said, okay, fine. You really want to see what Anibal Sanchez can do? Home opening weekend, the Detroit Tigers are playing the Boston Red Sox. Throw him out there against the Red Sox and see how he does. You know what's going to happen? He's probably going to get hit and lit up.
Lots of long balls probably being given up by Anibal. I could see that coming too. And the thing is, if you want to see what he can do as a 5th starter, haven't we seen a big enough of an example size or sample size from him last year and the year before when his ERA was over 5 and 4.99? So you had a guy that was totally irrelevant, couldn't get major league hitters out consistently as a starting pitcher, had to be relegated to the bullpen for a legitimate reason because he has become so irrelevant and couldn't get out major league hitters consistently last season or the prior season, which tells you now for 2 straight years from 2015 to 2016, those 2 seasons back to back, we saw a very, very irrelevant Anibal Sanchez that you couldn't trust every 5th day. So he showed you enough right there to say that he is not fit for the 5th starter job at this point, Doc.
So $16.5 million for Anibal Sanchez to be in the bullpen. But hey, whatever.
What a great salary. I would love to make that much money to just go out there and be a mop-up man of sorts or a long reliever at best. I mean, that's what Sanchez really, I think, is designated for right now. I think that's his best case scenario of what you'll get the most out of him in that role. It would be in the long relief role, which he'll serve as a mop-up man here and there as well, which means they don't view him very highly, and the Tigers should not view him very highly. Now, if they put him into that 5th starter job, they view him more highly than they should, and much more highly than you and I believe that he should be viewed as. So it would be, once again, a disservice and injustice to the Tigers and the Tigers faithful if Sanchez becomes the number 5 starter come opening day.
Did you hear the news about Michael Fulmer?
He will be the opening day starter. Yep.
So do you have your opening day plan set yet? Do you know what you're going to be doing for that day, for that Friday? I can let you know. Next Friday, April 7th, I'm off work, baby. I took off of work. No
Taking off.
plans.
You asked your boss, huh? You could take off, and your boss said yes, huh? That easy.
Exactly.
Which is just you asked yourself, and yourself said yes.
I asked the missus,
to the request.
Would you like to hang out and go and do something? So it's going to be dependent on the weather. If the weather's nice, we're going to go downtown early, maybe 9, 10 a.m., and just kind of bar hop a little bit. Not going to the game, not really willing to, take money out of my pocket just yet and drop $100 per ticket to go to sit, in a relatively good spot. So we'll go downtown, enjoy the vibe. But if it's foggy or if it's rainy or it's going to be super cold, we're staying in Macomb, baby. Just hang around and stay safe and have a good time for opening day. So I'm going to enjoy the festivities, which, unfortunately, if I do take a day off next Friday, makes next Saturday super busy. So I'm going to enjoy the day off, but I'm going to keep it within moderation, have a good time. But my wife has said to me, I really want to enjoy the opening day festivities. And I said, why not? Why not let her partake in the activities?
Oh, let your wife be nice to her, right? Let her be a part of the festivities. What a nice man, a loving husband that you are. Always loving and willing to serve and help me out and alter my delivery and mechanics when you have to as well. And I give you much credit for that, 'cause I know you love taking the credit, Doc.
Nick told me what your plans were for next Friday.
Grab him by the pussy.
You're trying to get some. Oh, you're going to get lucky next week.
You wish that would be the case. You could get some funny sound bites like that right there, which is hilarious. He's the president now. It's ludicrous in the nation. But anyway, that's a topic for another day, maybe for a Two Bad Hombres episode. Now, wanted to ask you now, Michael Fulmer is going to be the home opening day starter against the Bo Sox. Now, JV is set up as the opening day starter on the road April 3rd against the White Sox. Now, do you think it should have been set up that way where JV is actually starting on the road as the opening day starter and not Fulmer? Should they have waited to start Verlander until that opening day against the Boston Red Sox? I'm going to say no. I like it how it is with Verlander getting the nod on April 3rd because he's been the opening day starter how many times now in a Tigers uni? We know about that stats. It's high up there for JV, and he's a member of Tigers lore, and rightfully so for all his success over the years. Very deserving of that opening day starting nod. And, well, more deserving than a guy who will be in his second year in Michael Fulmer. Fulmer, though, I think, Doc, is very deserving of that home opening day start against the Boston Red Sox. And I like how they have it set up with Verlander starting on the road, Fulmer starting the home opening day for the Tigers.
Yeah, I think it's more prestigious for game one. And
yeah.
That's the nod that you look for from your organization. And Justin Verlander, obviously, with the salary that he has, with the amount of time and the service that he's put in with the Detroit Tigers, has earned the game one spot. So I think that Michael Fulmer is in a great position to come out there at home and do some things and to show off. But Boston's a tough team, right? And each year, though, I do find it interesting that they start off the season on a Monday or whatever day they start on, then they have a day off. And then they resume the series the following day after a day off, which is really weird.
Well, you know why they do that, though? Just in case of a rainout. If there is a rainout, they can make it up the next day, and it's all right because they're not scheduled to play another game. So it doesn't alter the schedule whatsoever. And, also a starting JV game one of the 162-game regular season. Well, you want to do that, too, because he is your ace all season long. You want to establish that right off the bat and don't want to have to alter the rotation. So by having him start as that opening day starter, it doesn't alter your plans for how you want to use the rotation throughout the season as it goes along. That's why he also is the opening day guy and very deserving it, a guy that should have won the Cy Young in 2016. Will he be a candidate for the Cy Young by the end of the season in 2017? That's a question for another day that we can really dive into, as I think we will see productive results out of JV. Honestly, I really believe that we'll see productive results out of Verlander all season long. More of the concerns are perhaps in the bullpen, but also, and Rondon kind of got knocked around. Did you see the other day? Rondon wasn't the most effective. He's that flame-throwing setup man. I think that they want to be the effective, consistent setup man in the Tigers bullpen. He's got to get guys out. Hopefully he does, because then you can't even get to your ninth inning guy, K-Rod, who might, not be as good as next year, or as last year too, remember.
All right, Vito, I do have a concern regarding a player on this team, and I thought that K-Rod was going to be a solid closer, and I still believe that. I believe that he is an upgrade over what we've had, but the last outing that he had, especially coming off of what, he kind of went through in the World Baseball Classic, kind of twinged a little bit, his groin, and was, really not too much of a factor in the World Baseball Classic. But the Tigers had a lead earlier in the week, and K-Rod gave up a bunch of home runs. And you look at it and you go, it's spring training. I know people are saying back off, stop looking at it. But each and every time a Detroit Tigers pitcher goes out there, and especially a pitcher from the bullpen, and they go out there and they have a performance, they have to realize that many people are going to be skeptical. Many people are going to be way hypersensitive, and I'm one of them, to their performance. And I just look at it and in totality, not only with K-Rod, but in totality, that bullpen primarily is the same. When you look at it in 2017, who's in that bullpen versus who was there in 2016, it's largely the same amount of people. And all I can do sitting here is be left wondering, man, oh man, I'm still not confident. I'm very skeptical that this bullpen is going to go out there and do some things. I could even say as early as game one, they could have a 2-1 lead versus the White Sox in the seventh inning. I'm not going to be comfortable. I'm going to be watching very closely this season as I have the past few. But as I sit here talking to you, I go, they really did not address the bullpen. What they did is kind of like really just
did nothing. Absolutely nothing. When they should have done a lot of stuff.
Right. And when you look at it, you go, that's been the Achilles heel for the better part of the last 4 years. I feel like, Vito, if they had just exclusively focused on the bullpen, you would have given the fans a lot more to be confident about. Because right now, going into the season, I think a lot of people are cautiously optimistic. They're excited to see what's happening. They don't think the Tigers are going to totally blow. But if you ask real diehard fans where they think this team's going, they probably will tell you nowhere because of the fact that they have not improved the bullpen. We're left sitting here wondering, hoping that the guys that were there have better years and have bounce-back years for some.
Like the Wilsons, right? Alex and Justin, will they have bounce-back campaigns?
And a great question that I heard, and is a very legitimate question. If you had one game and you needed one out from your bullpen, who do you call upon to have confidence that he's going to go out there and get the out?
The problem is you don't trust anybody in that role. That's the scary thing about the Tigers bullpen heading into opening day. And the thing is, the gap between the Tigers and these lesser ball clubs in the AL Central and the rest of the American League and Major League Baseball isn't as significant as it used to be because of the injury bug, aging vets, the rotation perhaps not being as solid. And it wasn't as solid last year. Might not be as solid once again this season. I don't see it taking a step back, but it might still be a little bit ineffective at times. And that's my concern when the bullpen, if the guys they have, if what they have planned for the pen to be successful, if that plan goes awry, well, then you have the problem with the bullpen once again, and maybe even to a more significant extent. And that would mean that they're going to be losing to ball clubs like the White Sox, who on paper aren't as talented as the Tigers. But in a 2-1 ball game, you know what? You got to worry about the Tigers bullpen once again, as we have season after season. It has seemed like, even when they've been highly relevant and been World Series contenders, which they're not entering the 2017 regular season. So you have to take that into account. And I think point that out, Doc, that the gap between the Tigers and the Royals, the White Sox, and Twins in the American League Central, not even naming the Indians, who are, leaps and bounds above the Tigers right now in the American League Central, in my opinion. But those teams that have been lesser in the past, you know what? The gap between the Tigers and them isn't nearly as significant. And that means if the bullpen really screws up, screws the pooch in 2017, then the Tigers could finish towards the very bottom of the division, maybe even in the cellar of the American League Central, which would be very disappointing. But remember, they did so. They finished in last two in 2015. When we didn't see that totally coming, but then the bottom just fell out on the Tigers. And after they made those deadline moves, the Tigers weren't nearly the same competitive ball club, and it showed in the second half of the season, and that's why they finished in dead last. And the injury to JD, the glaring void in center field, perhaps the struggles of the pen and some of the rotation at the back end of both, specifically, it might lead to the jump start of a rebuilding mode being entered by the Tigers too in 2017, which means we could see a dead last finish out of the Tigers in 2017, honestly. If everything really hits the fan, you could see the Tigers finishing in 5th place. Sad but true for me as a Tigers fan, and to all of you listening into this fine edition of Tigers Talk, that is a true possibility, Doc. A last place finish for the Tigers, if everything really goes awry. What do you think?
Man, I don't see last place. I see them being okay. I see them being around 500 the majority of the year. They're going to have some, long winning streaks, long losing streaks. But in the end, I think that the Indians obviously are the class of the division, and I think they'll probably finish 2nd or 3rd. Probably behind, if they're going to finish 3rd, they'll probably finish behind Minnesota or a resurging White Sox team that has some talent still. So it's just one of those things where, KC's still going to be in the mix too. Obviously, the early games in the season versus the Indians are going to be very important because the Indians won 15 of the 19 games last year. So you're going to have to go out there and start off strong. But next week, the Tigers start off the year versus the White Sox. Before we end the podcast, I want to get your opinion. How many games do you think legitimately do the Tigers have a chance of winning versus the White Sox on the road? When you look at the pitching matchups, when you look at what the Tigers are going to be able to do, you know that some of the players are going to be nicked up early to start the year. But when you have JV starting the year, I like JV in that first game. And
well, the Tigers honestly should win the series against the White Sox, but you can't take any team lightly, especially now because the Tigers aren't as good or strong of a ball club as they have been in recent memory. In my opinion, because of the injury bug, too, playing a major factor. So with that being said, do I see them winning the series against the White Sox? Yes. But what if the bullpen just falls on its face in the opening series of the season? What if that happens on the road against the Chi Sox, who, when you play there in Chi-Town on the south side of Chicago, guess what, too, Doc? They have a sand park. It's like a sand lot of a ballpark. The ball just flies. It flies out of, I believe it's Guaranteed Rate Field now in Chi-Town on the south side of Chicago for the White Sox. And the ball, it just flies out of there. So if you're a home run hitter like a Jose Abreu, and if you leave one up over the middle of the plate, Bruce Rondon, if he does that in the late innings, if K-Rod or Verlander, who had some problems with giving up the long ball last year, I believe gave up 30 in totality in 2016. If he shows some signs of that in his opening day start against the Chi Sox, they might just take off and kill the baseball and hit 2-3 home runs, which means the White Sox could actually pull that game out. And if they beat Verlander, they could pull that series out against the Tigers too. And the Tigers play 3 against Chi-Town on the road, and then they open up at Comerica with the Red Sox on Friday, April 7th, a day before my brother Dominic's birthday, by the way. So they play the Red Sox on April 8th, April 9th as well, and 10th. So a 4-game series from Friday through Monday to open up the home portion of the Tigers' schedule, which is kind of odd, a 4-game series like that. And it seems like they have opened up with the Red Sox in the past, too, at home. And those 4-game series played from Friday to the following Monday have become more and more popular, we have seen in Major League Baseball. And then right after that, they don't got a break in the action either. Right after the Red Sox, they got to play the Twins for 3 straight games, and then the Indians for 3 more in Cleveland. So, and the Twins aren't going to be as irrelevant. They're going to be no slouch this season. And we know the Indians are the best team in at least the American League Central. And they're being picked by more and more people as the season gets near. They're being picked as the early season, the preseason right now, American League favorite. And I like the Indians right now. The Indians are my American League favorite as well right now, Doc, as we talk here. And as we look outside the window and see the beautiful weather and people walking by.
There's going to be a new tenant next to the studio. So
you're just checking out what he looks like?
checking out the new tenant.
Okay.
And she's a female, and I think we have to go over there and introduce ourselves. Mm-hmm. We'll see maybe next week when we're recording our podcast next Tuesday. It'll be the Tigers' day off. And definitely for next week, what we'll do is we'll recap the Tigers' first game.
Absolutely.
We'll give our early impressions, and then we'll preview extensively the series versus the Red Sox in terms of the pitching matchups, and we'll do a more full-length podcast for the start of the season. You ready for this ride?
I am, very much so, but I'm not nearly as optimistic as I thought I would be going into the season because of the bullpen now. I have concerns about K-Rod more than I did, maybe a little bit more about Bruce Rondon, and about Zimmerman, about Sanchez being the fifth starter possibly over Matt Boyd. I don't like that whatsoever. Then about JD Martinez being hurt out for a month maybe to start the season, Doc. That ain't good whatsoever.
Yeah, start the year versus the White Sox, then you play a series versus Boston, Minnesota, then the Cleveland Indians come in.
Could be a bad start to the season. And by the way, I already mentioned all those games coming up, Doc. Were you listening to me at all?
No.
Now you're too busy watching the tenant outside while we're recording a podcast.
Cleveland on the road.
Yes, sir.
Friday, April 14th. Oh, man, baby. Three games. Maybe we'll go.
That could be ugly. We got to take a trip. How about you and I to a series in Chicago or against the Indians in Cleveland? Why not?
Why not?
Right?
Maybe we can do that this year.
Is it in the budget of the DSP network?
Potentially, if you get out there and keep hustling like you've been.
Or in the Doc budget? I mean, really, it's about your budget and what you can handle.
It's possible. Very possible.
We'd love to do it. Take a weekend-long trip to Cleveland, Chicago, like we said, and maybe it'll happen. And if it does, we'll have to be doing some Periscoping, some Facebook Living, and all of the above through, the resources that we have at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, Doc.
No doubt about it, Vito. Look at you, already willing to spend the DSP's money.
I'm able and willing always to spend your money, especially. So, and I think we'll do that a little bit throughout the season. And to everybody, please tune in to each and every single edition of Tigers Talk throughout the duration of the 2017 regular season.
And if you want to support Vito and all the podcasts here on DetroitSportsPodcast.com, just go to our website. And if you want to go to any sporting event, go check out the tickets. Affordable, and it's through SeatGeek. Anything at all that you purchase through SeatGeek from our website kicks us back a little something, and it helps keep this project running, keeping the lights on, the studio mics hot. So go visit DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Check out the tickets, and you can compare prices, and it's 100% guaranteed. We've been around since 2013, and our relationship with our affiliates is really good, and our sponsors. And we appreciate any help that you can give us. And one way is if you go to a sporting event, click through our website before you make a stop and buy those tickets.
We greatly appreciate everybody that is willing to listen to our crap that we spew every single week.
A lot more people every single week. It's great.
Good. I love that people love our crap. We love your crap, too. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again for next week's episode 85 of Tigers Talk.